In this video, I'm going to be mixing purple icing, and I will say that whenever anyone came to me and said, my colors are purple and anything, it just sent a shiver of fear through me because purple is the hardest color to keep consistent and to not fade. And it's because red food coloring and red and blue make purple, so purple has a lot of red in it. Red food coloring is very volatile, and for some reason, purple just wants to fade and it wants to turn blue. So the first thing I would suggest is that if you're mixing purple icing, get a purple food coloring and test it out. Because a lot of times the purple food coloring will fade and it'll turn blue. And I've had that happen to cakes on, for me before. It started out purple, by the time I got to the party it was blue. There's nothing you can do about it once it's on the cake. So that's the second thing I would say, is that mix the icing. If you have to have purple, mix the icing and let it sit. And do this a couple days ahead of time. Give it time to change color, and then you can adjust it from there. Because if it's going to change color, it's too late to change it if it goes on the cake. So just mix the purple up and let it sit and see if it changes. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. That's the thing, you can't predict it. It's very frustrating. Also, purple, when you put it into a venue, if you're at a wedding reception and there's lights on it, it's going to look different. So you just have to let brides be aware that if they have colored lights on the cake, it's not going to look purple, it's going to look different, and they could not, it might just look not what they want. And so you need to make sure that you're taking pictures of the cake before you deliver it or after you set it up, so that you can say, yeah, it was the right color when they call you and say you made the color wrong. Anyway, that's just my tip as a professional wedding cake designer, because it happens. All right, so if we're talking about purple, you have to make sure that you know what the bride is talking about, or the customer, if it's just a birthday cake or something like that. Purple can go from anywhere very blue to very pink. And these are kind of gray. These are like a heather purple, but it can be anywhere from this lavender is very light all the way down to something very dark. And you need to know what you're going for. But let's just mix some to see what happens. And I'm only going to be using 2 food colorings. I'm going to use red and blue. This is Americolor Super Red, and this is Americolor Royal Blue. We're going to mix these two to see if I can get a purple color, and then I'm actually going to let it sit. I'm going to let it sit and see if it changes, because it tends to do that, and just purple just makes me so nervous, you guys. I just can't even tell you. One tip that I will give you is that if you have purple flowers, a lot of times it's easier to do gum paste and just to do purple dust, like color dust on the surface of the gum paste. And that won't change. If you have just dust, it's not going to change because it's just dry and it stays the same color. So you might want to suggest to people to have the icing white and then add purple in other ways, like a purple fondant band around the base or purple flowers. It's just safer than icing, because icing is just so tricky. All right, so I'm going to start with this red. I am using toothpicks because I don't want to start with too much and not be able to come back. So we're going to start with the red. And, like I said, in color theory, when you mix red and blue, purple results, but it depends on how much you put in for each and what the color starts out with. And as I'm mixing this, I'm seeing that this is, Super Red is a very orangey red, which is fine, except that you're going to have to really counteract that with the blue to get it to purple. So I'll just mix this up and then we'll see about adding the blue. Okay, so now we have a pink color. This is a very orangey pink though. So I'm going to add a little tiny bit of blue to see what happens. And this is already going to be too dark. If I'm going to make like a super light lavender, this is too dark. So you would have to add more white icing or just start again with less red. But if you wanted like a super pale lavender, it's just going to be too dark and you're not going to be able to get it back. So just start out with less food coloring than you think you need and add more. You can always make it darker. You can't make it lighter unless you just add more icing. And I say this in all my food coloring mixing videos, but make sure that you're making more of the color than you think as far as the icing amount goes, because it's really hard to match icing if you run out and you have to make more. And it's better just to have a little bit left over, and you can use that for something else, like decorate cupcakes or do whatever you want. But just make more than you need to begin with so that you don't run out and get stuck. Okay, I want to pause and show you this. You see this little tiny streak of red in there. I don't know if you can see that. There's a little tiny streak of red in there. And the reason that I'm trying to be really thorough about scraping the bowl as I'm mixing is that if you don't scrape the bowl, you're going to get little swirls of icing like that. And you see me scraping the bowl, so it happens anyway. Just make sure that you're mixing everything up and really scraping the bowl, because food coloring can stay on the little spatula, it can stay on the bowl. And if you don't mix it in, it's going to make streaks on your cake. All right, now we have what looks to me like a really good kind of bubblegum pink color. So that's just the red and a tiny bit of the blue to tone it down. I'm going to save some of this so that we could look at that later as a comparison. But this is actually a really good pink color. So I'm going to do a little separate video for that, because that's, you know, that's great. If you need this color, that's how to do it. Red with a tiny bit of blue. I'm going to add some more blue, and we're going to make this a little more purple and see how that goes. Now we have this is a very pretty lavender. I really like this color. I'm going to put a little bit of it here, and we can see the two. That was the first one, and this is what you get just by adding a little bit of blue. So it's really taking it down in that direction. And I'm going to keep adding some more blue, I think. I don't know. See, at this point, if I add more red, it's going to take it back in the direction of the red, which I'm saying in the direction, like on the color wheel, you have red and purple is right next to it, and then blue is over here. So we're sitting here at purple. If I add more red, it's going to make it like a more of a burgundy color. If I add more blue, it's going to take it more into the violet range. I should do a thing about the color wheel. But I just want to make it darker. So I think I need to add a little bit of each, but I'm going to start with the blue so that I can see how much red, because the red is such a strong color. I'm going to add a lot of blue, and then we'll go in with the red after that to see if I add just a little bit, it'll probably work. I don't want to add too much red to begin with, because then it's going to be hard to get it back. Now we have a color that is just gorgeous. It's gorgeous, but it's way too blue. So I would say that this, you could call this like a blueberry. It's very purpley blue. We're going to have to add some more red to kind of get back to the red side, but I don't want to do too much. This is a beautiful color, but maybe just a little tiny bit, and then we can add more. Like I said, you can always add more. You can't take the color away. And one thing you can do, if you really want a very light color, like a lilac that's very pale, make a darker version about this amount, and then you can add the darker icing into a big bowl of white icing to tint it just a little bit. And a lot of times that's the best way to mix it, because you can see what color you've got and you're working with, and then add it to the white and get a lighter shade of that, as opposed to trying to mix the white. A lot of times that won't work, and you just end up too dark. So let's mix this red in and see how that changes it. Now, that is so pretty. I mixed the red in. It didn't look like it did very much, and it really didn't. So I'm going to put more red. I put a very teeny tiny amount. I could put a little bit more. And obviously never put the toothpicks back into the food coloring after you've put it in the icing. That's why I'm using toothpicks, so I can control the amount I'm putting in, but then I use a clean toothpick. But now I've got all this red on the spatula, so let's do that. Now we have this is very, very pretty, and it is a little more purple than this last one. I don't know if you can see the difference very much. See how much bluer this is than this one? It's very subtle, but it's definitely more purple, so we're going in the right direction. I'm going to add a little bit more red and keep going in the direction of the purple, away from the red on the spectrum. We just want to get a little bit more to give it that tint. But I think, this is definitely, I would call this more of a periwinkle or a violet. I wouldn't call this purple. Well, it is kind of purple, but I wouldn't call it purple yet. I'm actually going to put what I call a decent amount of red. I'll put this back over here. And if I need to, I think I'll probably need to add more, but I don't want to go too much. I don't want to add too much color, just a little bit at a time. Now we have purple, and I'm going to put this here and you can see the difference. All right, so we started with just the red, added a tiny bit of blue, a little more, this is a lot of blue, okay, and then we're going back in the red direction, add a little more red, and now we're back to this. And if you look at this one and this one, this is the red and the blue. This is basically more of the red and the blue, and these are very similar. This is kind of a lighter tint to this. It's just a lighter version of this darker one. But this is a pretty good purple, and if you wanted to make it darker, you would just add more red and blue. Just keep going back and forth, adjusting a little bit at a time until you get the dark color that you want. I think that that's pretty good. And if I'm looking at this, if I put this on a cake, it's purple. So that would work. What I'm going to do now, just out of curiosity, I'm going to let this sit. I'm going to cover it and just let it sit with... maybe I won't cover it. No, I'm going to cover it like I would be storing it. I'm going to let it sit and see if it changes color. And I will come back in, I don't know, 12 hours or something. And we'll see if it changes color. But now that I have this on film, I have evidence of what it looked like. I can test and we can check to see if this actually does change color or if it holds the color. And sometimes it will and sometimes it won't. It's a very strange thing. All right, it's actually been 24 hours. I let this sit all over, like I just let it sit overnight. I covered it with plastic wrap, which could be one thing that you need to understand, that the air sometimes will make it change. But it looks like it actually held its color pretty well. So this is the purple, and I have looked at the previous video. It looks like it's pretty much the same color. And you can see that the little bowl where I changed things, the color has held. So I'm actually impressed because it's hard to predict. And I honestly, depending on the brand of food coloring, sometimes they'll change and you just don't know. But the Americolor seems to be holding its color pretty well. And I will not guarantee that your conditions are going to work the same. It could be different if it is refrigerated. It could be different if it's exposed to the air. But I would always recommend that if you're working with purple, to mix the icing up first and then let it sit, because you just don't know what it's going to do. And honestly, there's no way to predict. I was pretty sure that this was going to change color. I'm glad that I'm wrong, because now I can say that the Americolor actually does hold its color pretty well in my experience. Now, this was room temperature, which we have air conditioning on now, so it's probably around 76, 78. And it was covered with plastic wrap loosely. It wasn't super tight, but it was not refrigerated. And it was not exposed to the air. So those two conditions could change it, but just be aware that you need to mix this up ahead of time, let it sit, make sure it's not going to change color on you, because I really have had icing go from this to this like in an hour. It didn't take long, and it's very disappointing when it's on a cake already and you can't fix it. All right, so that was it. Leave me any questions. I hope this was fun, and I will talk to you later.